We contacted Google here in Denmark and said, would you like to come on the program to comment on this? And they can't make it, but they referred us to an op-ed by Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO of Google, where he writes about privacy. That was in May in the New York Times. And he says we're actually very concerned with the privacy of our users. We are working with data minimization as a principle to protect our users' privacy. So in his opinion, they're working on solving the problem of everyone's privacy. What do you think of that response?
There have been many strategies that the leading surveillance capitalists have used to protect themselves from law. And unfortunately, one of those strategies is rhetoric. And as I have gone into in excruciating detail in my own research, the rhetoric is designed to misdirect, to obfuscate, to confuse. And unfortunately, these trends are still alive and well. So we can ask Mr. Pichai, for example, why Google has the largest political lobbying operation in the history of lobbying. They lobby the US federal government, they lobby the European Union, they lobby against any kind of regulation, against any kind of law that would impede the model that I've described to you. We know that literally every day there are new revelations. And so when Mr. Pichai talks about privacy, and I learned this a long time ago, I used to watch videos of the Google executives way back in the 2011, 12, 13. They would always say, we don't sell your personal data. And so I tried to understand, how do they get away with saying that? Eventually, after interviewing dozens and dozens of data scientists, I began to put the picture together. They're not selling what we give them. They are hunting and capturing vast amounts of information about us in ways that are invisible to us. We don't know about all the data that they're capturing. Those trillions of data points, those millions of predictions per second, those are coming from data that go far beyond the little bit of data we give them. So when they talk about privacy, when Mr. Pichai talks about privacy, he has a very narrow conception. He's talking about, what is the data that I consciously give to Google? But what is being ingested in those AI factories is exponentially more data than that. One final thought. We've made a big mistake over these 20 years. We think that privacy is something private. That's a terrible error. That's what philosophers call a category error, thinking that something is one thing when it's really another. Privacy is not private. Privacy is a collective action problem. So we may make a personal calculation and say, well, I'll search on Google and they'll get my search results, but in return, I get this great search engine, and that's a trade-off I'm willing to make. What we don't realize is that every time we engage with these interfaces, they're lifting predictive signals from us. And we are contributing to the AIs that are training millions of models in order to predict human behavior at scale, predict what our groups do, predict what our cities' populations will do, predict what our demographic configuration will do. Through these large predictive models, they're able to then come back to our individual profiles, fit us into these predictive models, and understand what we're most likely to do in the future, what our behavior is likely to do. So we think it's a private action, but we are actually contributing to these new systems that aim for certainty and control over human behavior for the purposes of meeting their business customers' commercial objectives, right? So this is a social problem, not just an individual problem.